New York, a hell of a town. The Bronx is up and the Battery's down. The people ride in a hole in the ground. New York, New York, it's a hell of a town.
My name's Catherine Snider, and I'm the music and vocal director for On the Town. I have done 3.5 shows for SBMT. I was the vocal director for Les Mis, I was the music vocal director for MAME, and I was the music and vocal director for South Pacific, which was one of the first casualties of the pandemic. On the Town's staff represents a pretty remarkable moment in Broadway history. Adolph Green, who was one of the writers, he was 30. His writing partner, Betty Comden, and composer Leonard Bernstein, and choreographer Jerome Robbins, they were all 26, 27 years old. It's pretty remarkable when you think about that. They were all so young and just on the verge of their entire careers. Jerome Robbins, of course, would go on to become one of the greatest and most influential choreographers of the 20th century. Comden and Green would go on to write the scripts to Singing in the Rain and The Bandwagon and so many other classics. And Bernstein, of course, gave us West Side Story and Candide and Wonderful Town, and later in his career became an extremely important conductor and music educator and composer for classical music. So it really was a quite literal stars aligning at this moment that we had this team create this wonderful show. It's really hard to pick favorite songs when you're talking about Bernstein. Bernstein is such a sophisticated composer and his music is so meaty, there's so much to dive into. It's modern, it's melodic, it's dissonant, it's consonant, it has a lot going for it. But if pressed, I will confess that I really like the quartet at the end of the show called Some Other Time. And then I love the orchestration of the two pas de deux in the show. There's one in Lonely Town and there's one in the imaginary Coney Island that are just breathtaking and that just give me chills every single time I conduct them. Whenever I'm fortunate enough to have the opportunity to work on a Bernstein show, one of the first things that I always do is immediately schedule 1 or perhaps 2 extra orchestra rehearsals that I would not have normally done on any other show. And the reason is because Bernstein music's really hard. So one of the greatest things about this production is that I have 15 incredible musicians in the pit, and they really have dived in with all of their passion to learn this incredibly challenging score. It's rhythmically difficult, it changes rhythm and grooves and tempos a lot. It's not necessarily consonant and melodic. Some of the lines don't fit into people's fingers the way that instrument players usually learn classical technique. So there's a lot to learn. And I've been really fortunate at how gracious and flexible and wonderful the orchestra has been who we've gathered for this show. One of the things that makes Bernstein so remarkable is that his music is very hummy and singable, but yet it's also sort of modern and dissonant. And it seems easy to learn and remember, but it's also extremely sophisticated and has a unique sort of American modern sound, even though it feels very much like classic musical theater. And it's this interesting dichotomy that I think makes the score so wonderful and makes it such a challenge, but also such a joy to work on and also listen to as an audience member. A lot of people love and grew up with the movie of On the Town. That was my first exposure to it too, because I'm such a huge Gene Kelly fan and it's one of my favorite movies. What a lot of people don't realize is that the movie is not the Bernstein score. Bernstein was nudged out for that, and they actually rewrote many songs for the movie. Comden and Green did come over and work on the lyrics for the adaptation of the movie musical, and they wrote the lyrics for the new songs. But you will not hear the songs that you know from the movie in this production, except for just 1 or 2 that were carried over. On the Town has some really interesting little trivia bits associated with it. One of them is that Nancy Walker, who many of you will remember from comedic television from a few decades ago, she played the original Hildy in On the Town. She was only 22. And Comden and Green, who were the writing partners who wrote the book and the lyrics, they actually played the original Ozzie and Claire in the musical on Broadway. And then also On the Town was known for its deliberately diverse casting choices, and so that was sort of unusual for its time in the 1940s. The original Ivy was a Japanese American woman. The second music director who came in and replaced the original was African American, and there were 6 black members of the cast who were considered to be part of the fabric of New York, and Jerome Robbins made it very clear that he wanted them to be everywhere and paired up with every other cast member to make New York on stage look the way that New York looked in real life. So in those ways, it was a little bit ahead of its time as well. You really want to come see On the Town because it's done so rarely, and it's so unusual to find a company who's willing to tackle this large, complicated, beautiful, sophisticated show. And I can't stress enough that when that opportunity comes to your neighborhood, you need to rush out and see it so that you can see for yourself what an incredible work of art this is.